Good morning everybody, and hi, welcome again to my latest video where I'd like to share with you the transformational coaching journey I've been on since April 2015 and how I've went from a life of desperation really to a life that's now just amazing. But to start with, I'd like to mention why was my life so desperate, and it's because of the multitudes of mental health illnesses which I suffered from at the time. Now, just to give you an idea of what I was going through at the time, I've decided to share with you all my mental health illnesses, and there's quite a lot, so I had to write them down, so if you just bear with me please. So I suffered from OCD, anxiety, high anxiety, panic attacks, depression, irrational thinking, convoluted thinking, emotional trauma and trauma, paranoia, low confidence, self-worth and self-esteem, loneliness, mania, hypermania, partial blindness, epilepsy and addictions to prescription, non-prescription drugs, and I was also an alcoholic. I've been through detoxification from alcohol over 12 times. But I also had very little respect for myself, for my mental health and for my body really. So in April 2015 I started working with Tony Selimi. He's a life coach, a business coach, a healer, and he's also written 2 Amazon best-selling books, which are these. And my life really was desperate then. Pretty much, if I hadn't started working with Tony in April 2015, I know by April 2016 I wouldn't be alive. And this is a picture of me in April 2015, looking quite pale, grey and down really. I'd been suffering from mental health illnesses for over 20 years at this point, and this was actually me on my way to meet Tony for the first time. And I really love this picture because in the background here these words say new thinking, new possibilities, and on that day I never knew how my life was going to transform, and the new thinking I would now have and the new possibilities that I create every day. So I'd like to share with you something very personal to me, something which happened in my early 20s because of how desperate my situation was. So in my early 20s I attempted suicide, but this suicide attempt was a cry for help. It wasn't a definite attempt at suicide, it was a cry for help, and I have to admit that. But in my mid-30s I attempted suicide again, only this time it wasn't a cry for help. I didn't tell anyone about it at the time, and no one really still knows about it until I recently wrote about it in my last blog. This time I just done what I'd done, passed out, and I really hoped I wouldn't wake up. But fortunately I did wake up. And that's all I'd really like to say about that at this moment in time, thank you. But as I started working with Tony, basically this was to help me get better from my OCD. I suffered from OCD since I was 17. Every mental health expert and professional I've seen in the NHS told me I had incurable OCD and that I should learn to live with it. And when you're told that at a young age and your OCD progressively gets worse over the years, it becomes intolerable and really hard to cope with, and I really couldn't live with it much longer. That's how desperate I was. And Tony's took me through a transformational healing process in the last 2 years, which has now completely healed me of my OCD, and I never expected that when I started working with him. But Tony also recommended this man's work to me, which is Dr. John Demartini, and he asked me to attend this, which is a breakthrough experience. This takes place twice a year, every year in London. And when I attended this, I got to have a couple of conversations with Dr. John Demartini, And like many people, he struggled with my Scottish. He actually thought I was Irish. Thanks, John. And some of the things John spoke about on that day really resonated with me, especially with regards to depression and my depression. So when John mentioned that depression can be linked to suppression and repression, it just made sense to me that if you're repressing who you are inside, you're too afraid to tell people what you're going through, and you're suppressing all this, it can be linked to depression. John also mentioned that if you're not doing what you want with your life, and if you don't know what you want to do with your life, you can become depressed. And this made great sense to me also. So one of the ways Tony helped me begin to heal my OCD was to help me see that I had a skewed perception of my OCD, or that I had an unbalanced, lopsided perception of my OCD, that I purely seen it as an illness because this is what I was told and this is what was reinforced into me, and that I also purely seen it as a bad experience. And for 20 years that was how I seen it, just as a bad experience. So Tony took me through a process where he asked me to write down 400 drawbacks of my illness, OCD, which was done fairly quickly by myself. And he then asked me to write 400 benefits. And I have to admit, I was astounded when he asked me to do this. I couldn't see any at all, but he worked with me, and I got there. It took me 2 weeks. And once I'd done that, I kind of broke through this energy that the OCD held me in, and I stopped being a victim to my circumstance. Thank you for that, Tony. But to demonstrate this to you, this skewed perception, I'd like to do this by covering my right eye. So I've been partially blind since I was aged 22, and I lost 80% vision in my left eye. So when I go like this, most of what I'm looking at now disappears and it becomes a blur of colour. If I try to pick something up, I can't, because my depth perception's gone. I may think I've got it in my hand, but I don't have it in my hand. And for years I focused on what I'd lost, how I'd lost all this on my left hand side. But Tony asked me one day, he says, what did you gain? What did you gain when this happened to you? And I started to see what I gained, and I gained many blessings in becoming partially blind, such as I became more flexible and adaptable in the way I have to do things, and I developed this amazing eye for detail. So when I'm at my work and I'm going through documents every day, I can pick up on errors in the documents that others would miss. And I started to see that my partial blindness wasn't all bad as well, that it brought many gifts into my life. Thanks again for that, Tony. So as I mentioned, when John says, if you don't know what you're doing with your life, you can, or what you want to do with your life, you can become depressed. So how did I go about starting to do what I wanted with my life? Well, Tony took me through a process where it's called Vital Planning for Elevated Living. It's a 5-day coaching process with Tony, and you spend 10 hours a day for 5 days, and basically you write a plan. You develop a plan that you work on every day to start building the most amazing life that you want to experience and achieve. And this was a really magical 5 days, and it was also when we drilled down to the root of my OCD, just why I had OCD in the first place. And in the last 2 years, my awareness of everything going on around me has just grown and grown, and I now see gratitude in everything around me. Tony really helped me develop an attitude of gratitude, and by that I mean, recently I enjoyed a theatre trip to London with Tony and several other amazing friends, and as I was sat in the theatre and I looked around, I started seeing how we're connected, how everyone is connected. And by this, what I mean is, for me to get to London that day, I had to travel on the train from Edinburgh, and then I had to go to my hotel in London, And then as I'm sat in the theatre, I started seeing, just for me to be in that theatre that day, on that train, somebody had to design that train. People had to design it, people had to build it, the parts had to be shipped and it had to be manufactured, just for me to experience being in London. When I got to the hotel, I was looking around and I said, somebody's cleaned this room for me, somebody's designed this building, people have built this building. It might have been 100 years ago, but people built this building. As I mentioned, somebody's cleaned the room, somebody's took their time to clean this room just so I can be here and be comfortable and spend some time in London. And then as I was sat in the theatre, I thought, this is a really great experience, but I wouldn't be experiencing this like this without all the people around me, the people in the audience, the people who are on stage, who have spent so much time developing their skills. And even the seat I was sat in, who designed the seat? How did it get here? Just so I can have this experience. And I really started seeing hundreds of ways to be grateful. And I wasn't really grateful during the last 20 years of my life. I really hated my life when I was going through all these illnesses. And this is what Tony's coaching has done for me. It's transformed how I see the world. And I love how I see the world now and how we are all connected, and how issues such as mental health illnesses, suicide, they affect us all. And it's only in me being able to talk more openly about it that I feel liberated from it as well. So I just really like to thank my coach and my healer and my friend Tony for all he's done for me. And if this video helps someone else out there, that's great. And if you'd like to connect with Tony yourself, you can get both these books off Amazon, Path to Wisdom, #Loneliness, The Virus of the Modern Age, or go on his website www.tonyselimi.com and just see what he can do for you. And I'd like to end the video by showing you this photo again. So this was me in April 2015, and I was very ill back then, and I really was in the last year of my life. I wasn't going to survive much longer the way I was going. And this is me in May 2017, and I'm sure you can see the difference. It's really a transformational difference. And one of the other benefits of being Tony's client is I get invited to many of his amazing talks, such as this talk, and this photo was actually taken at Cranfield University. And it's great going to all these places, and he really looks after his clients. I mean, he's took me to theatre shows in the West End, dinners in Covent Garden, and he even took me on a trip to the Houses of Parliament one day, which was fantastic. So thanks Tony, and thank you all for watching this video, and I do really hope it does help. Thank you.